And we are back on the 0 Hour. Joining us now, and it's always a pleasure to have him, is Wendell Potter, former Cigna executive turned whistleblower, now a senior fellow, I believe his title is senior fellow with the Center for Public Integrity, an observer, a commentator, and analyst of what's going on in the healthcare industry in the United States. Wendell, as always, thanks for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me back on.
Oh, you bet. Did I get your title right, by the way?
I think you did. It sounds pretty reasonable to me.
All right, okay. We'll go with it then, as they say. Listen, you wrote an excellent piece, Wendell, which was published at the Center for Public Integrity and Huffington Post, a couple other places too, I imagine. The topic was that health insurance companies in this country are seeing their profits soar even as they dump small business customers. Tell us a little bit about what you found when you took a look at that.
Well, regrettably, it's a trend that started before the Affordable Care Act was passed. But as I pointed out, these companies, the large for-profit insurance companies, and even some of the nonprofit Blue Cross plans have done exceedingly well financially since the law was passed. One of the reasons I left my job in the industry, and which I testified before Congress about, was a practice in the industry of purging or dumping small business accounts if the insurance company decided or had evidence that they were unprofitable. And in many cases, it just takes one worker or one dependent or child of a worker to get sick and have high medical bills for an insurance company to decide that small account, that small business account, is no longer profitable. In other words, it's costing them more than they want to pay out in medical claims. So the practice is called purging because they go about pricing the renewal policy so high when it comes up for renewal that the small business owner usually has no choice but to drop coverage, even if they try to go find coverage somewhere else with another company. They often can't do it because they have to disclose that they have a family or a worker or a dependent who's had high medical claims. That's one of the ways they've been able to be as profitable as they have been, by getting rid of customers that they don't want to insure anymore, and that also includes individuals. But since the law was passed, they've been doing exceedingly well financially, and that practice can still go on. Obamacare doesn't end that. United Healthcare, in fact, has its profits have increased, I think it's about 350%. Since the law was passed in 2010.
You included some impressive statistics in there, Wendell Potter from the Center for Public Integrity, and including the fact that United Healthcare stock is now at $113.85, up from $30.40 when the law was passed. So the law has been very good to them. Now, I think a lot of people don't understand this, and I think this is something people need to understand. They're very well aware of the fact that rightfully so, the law prevents individual people from getting losing their health insurance if they have a serious medical condition, and serious in this case from the insurance company's perspective, meaning expensive. So, and I think people understand that's something that the law provides, but I don't think people understand this problem with small insurance groups, which are experience rated, as they say, meaning as you described, based on the cost of their claims, that when these groups get dropped, there's nothing in the law which prevents that from happening. That spikes the health insurance companies' profits. And then let's talk for a minute about what happens if I'm a small employer or I work for a small employer, my health insurance gets dropped because somebody in the plan was sick. What happens to us then under the new law, typically?
Well, under the law, theoretically and hopefully in practice this year and at least next year, small businesses will be able to enroll through separate exchanges. As we've heard a lot of talk about the exchanges or marketplaces that are available in every state. In the District of Columbia, in which individuals can buy coverage if they can't get it at the workplace or if they've been turned down before the law was passed. There's a separate exchange that has been slow to get off the ground for various reasons. It's called the SHOP Exchange. It's a small business plan, especially for small businesses. And that could be a recourse for a lot of small businesses that have not been able to afford coverage or can no longer be able to afford coverage because of their, the health of their workforce.
Well, okay, and so in the meantime, what happens, I gather then, for these small businesses until the shop exchanges get fully up and running, is that their employees are more or less on their own to try to get coverage through the individually through the exchanges. Is that a fair description of what happens now?
Is exactly what happens, and it's a trend that's been going on for many, many years, as I pointed out in the column. Small businesses have been facing this issue and have had to drop coverage. It's the number of small businesses offering coverage has dropped steadily since the 1990s. Back in the 1990s, as many as 65% of small businesses were offering coverage, and it's down to far less than that. It's about half now. And a big part of that is because they just simply cannot afford the premium increases they've been hit with every year. They are more susceptible to getting premium increases than large employers and have been for a long, long time.
Now, Wendell, you and I have talked about our respective experience in the health insurance industry, and we've talked about our views of the law. I understand the good things the law does. I may be a little tougher on it than some folks are, but I guess where I'm going with this is a good thing the law does is that if you're forced to buy insurance on the individual market, things are a lot better now than they used to be, thanks to the exchanges and the rules imposed on them and so on. But I would say, and I'm curious to know if you agree with me, that if your employer has been buying health insurance, you work for the typical small employer with health insurance, and the employer is no longer able to provide that, and you're sent to the exchange as an individual to purchase coverage, you're probably going to spend more and get less coverage. Is that a fair statement, you think?
It is a fair statement. Now, it depends, of course, on what your income is, what you'll have to pay if your income is up to 400% of the federal poverty level, which I think is close to $17,000 maybe for an individual, and 23 or 24,000 for a family of 3 or 4. If your income is up to 400% of the federal poverty level, you're eligible for subsidies to help you buy coverage, and you also may be able to get some help paying your out-of-pocket expenses depending on your income too. But if you earn more than that, you're going to be having to pay the full freight yourself, and chances are you'll have to pay considerably more than you would have if you were getting your coverage through your employer, unfortunately.
And my sense is by paying more, that involves both in premiums but also in out-of-pocket costs, and depending on, of course, the nature of the plan you select. But you may have higher deductibles, higher co-payments, that sort of thing, right?
That's exactly right. And what we're finding, of course, is that a lot of people are shopping for they're shopping for premiums. They're looking for the lowest premiums they can afford, and in many cases, they're not paying enough attention, in my view, for what their out-of-pocket expenses will be. But even if they are, some people just can't afford to buy more than a bronze plan that requires them to pay quite a bit more out of their own pockets for care if they get sick or injured, to the tune of several $1,000s a year. And for a lot of middle-income families, that's just that can be a budget buster.
Right, and I think we're talking with Wendell Potter of the Center for Public Integrity, and I think that's a concern I have that I know you share, which is so many people nowadays with wages flat and so on for the middle class. Exactly as you said, I think there's a situation where people can only, in some cases, only afford the premium for the lowest end plan, and then they more or less pray that nobody's going to get really sick, that those out-of-pocket expenses aren't going to go through the roof. But we've seen the studies, the Milliman and other studies that show how expensive it can get, let's say for a family of 4. So what's the solution? Where can we try to push? I know in Washington, I think there's a certain burnout, at least outside the Republican Party, which perennially votes against this law. I think on the Democratic side, the liberal side, there may be some burnout on the health insurance topic, but it's important. What can be done on the policy side to alleviate this problem a little bit?
Well, you're right. I think there is burnout at the federal level, and I don't think that, considering the makeup of the current Congress, that we're going to see any attention paid to trying to be of help to individuals and families who are facing these hardships. I think there could be some help depending on where you live. Some states are undoubtedly going to be looking at ways to improve access to care, may be able to do things and more apt to do things depending on the leadership of the legislature and who the governor is, than other states, and certainly more than the federal government. I do think that we'll probably see if there is any improvement in access and cost of care over the next couple of years. It'll be done at the state level and maybe even the private sector.
You know, you went through in your latest piece, and you talked about, and not just United, but all of the health plans that are doing so well under this new program. I can't call it up, but the big six are doing quite well. Should there be any kind of public pressure, you think, on our old employers to be better corporate citizens, or is political change in public policy the only solution?
I think public policy is probably the only solution. And as you well know, they were not too keen on having to make the changes they've had to make, even though, as it has turned out, and in fact I expected it would turn out that they would do quite well. I testified before Congress at one point and said that if Congress passed the law without a public option, that they might as well call it the Health Insurance Profit Protection and Enhancement Act. I was being a bit glib, but my point was that they would figure out ways to make money off of this law, because they would get a steady stream of revenue that they hadn't had before. It would level the playing field, which is a good thing. They all have to operate in the same way. They would have to insure people that they've deemed uninsurable in the past, but they'd be getting billions of dollars from the federal government in subsidies. So they're getting an enormous infusion of revenue, and they're converting a lot of that into profit.
Well, I remember when you spoke up on that topic, I was writing as quickly and furiously as I could about the same issues, and so it was reassuring to have a friend out there, because I do have to say, predicted that they would do quite well in this, and they certainly have. Now, the question is whether we can muster enough public enthusiasm and or outrage to change the situation, make it even better for the public. So we appreciate the great work that you're doing in this area, Wendell Potter of the Center for Public Integrity. I hope you will come back and talk to us again about this.
I'd love to, RJ. Thanks for having me on today.
It's always a pleasure. That was Wendell Potter talking about the profit run that the insurance companies have enjoyed as a result of the ACA, and how they are not turning that back to small employers. So we're going to have to pressure our leaders at state and federal level to do something about it. I am Richard RJ Eskow, and this is The Zero Hour.